Okay, and maybe we can start. So hello and welcome everyone to this talk number 6 of our Distant Talks cycle, which is a collection of seminars organized by PhD students and candidates of the Inter-University Program of Urban and Regional Development of Politecnico di Torino and University of Torino. I am Caterina Pozzobon, and today I'm going to moderate this session. Before introducing today's topic and today's guests, I'd like to remind you that the next Distant Talk will be on June 9th, and it will be about the social innovation and urban energy transition, emerging questions and issues, and it's going to be with Giorgos Koupoufikis, which is a Greek scholar. You can find the whole program anyway on our Facebook page. The page is called Distant Talks. So the session today will be organized as follows. So first we're going to hear from our two guests, and who I welcome and thank very much for finding the time to be with us today. I know it's a very busy period for every one of us, so thank you very much. So we will hear from them, and then we will have time for a debate. So I kindly ask you to wait until the end of both speeches before asking your questions or sharing your ideas. And I would like to also remind you that this talk will be recorded and uploaded on YouTube. So if you don't want your words to be part of the recording, just email me after the talk, and I will edit out the parts in which you're talking. So yeah, it's going to be this option. So let's now begin. And let me introduce you to our guests for today. Probably some of you already know them. There is Egidio Dansero, which is a full professor of the University of Torino, and Elisabeniante, which is an associate professor of the University of Torino as well. They're both geographers and both have very relevant experiences in working on the theme on which we will talk about today, which is the relationship between academic research and international cooperation. So today they will share their experience and their thoughts with us, so they will help us to reflect on such an interesting and potentially beneficial, but not always easy relationship. So thank you again, and I will leave the floor now to Egidio Dansero, which I know has some slides to share. So yeah, welcome.
Thank you, Caterina. Okay, I try to share my slide. Just to, sorry, I have to screen, so I am not sure to, okay. Can you see?
Yep, yes.
Okay, I think that now you can see it. Please, Caterina, stop me anyway, because I don't know how much your colleague knows about development cooperation. So I will just a few words of presentation. Okay, Caterina has already said something. Now you see these strange animals on this JECO, that is a group that we created some years ago that is geography and development cooperation. And so maybe that it will be with us for some slide. Anyway, I have a degree in economics and then a PhD in urban and regional geography. And I teach mainly in courses both at the bachelor degree and the master degree that are about international and development studies. And so this is our main topics from the formation point of view. I am at the campus Luigi Einaudi together with Elisabeniante, and I am also vice rector for sustainability and development cooperation. So, and in this way, I can also introduce some activity that we have started some years ago, with a network of university on development cooperation, that is this CUCS, Coordinamento Università per la Cooperazione e lo Sviluppo, with many conferences that we organize. Each 2 years we organize a national conference. We organized in the past, in 2013, one conference among jointly between Politecnico and University of Turin, and here you can still find the link. And also we created a journal about the university and development cooperation. So we are particularly interested, me and Elisa, in discussing with you about the possible approaches and problems in linking together research and development cooperation. And I am also involved in many formation activities with this master course in Area and Global Studies for International Cooperation, together with Elisa, in this master on management of development, and this one on ICT for development and social good. That are this master is together with the training center of ILO, and this master is together with this ONG 2.0, that is a sort of consortium of NGOs. I don't really say so much about this, but just to say that if we are trying to think about the relationship between research and development cooperation, we must think that development cooperation involves what we mean about development cooperation. There is an evolution along the time about development assistance doctrine. So what is development cooperation today is not the one that was 10 years or 20 years ago, and there is a debate. And when we speak about development cooperation, we speak about also many actors, donors, recipients, but also international organizations, governments, NGO, philanthropic association. So it is a very complex arena, and also about many flows that are financial flows, but also more general economic and cultural and social flows that link together. And also, development cooperation is a very complex management activities within many big programs, among the big programs, the little projects and micro projects, and many processes. So I just want to say something about this point, the relationship between research and development cooperation. Obviously, this our positionality towards development. Also, we define differently this cooperation and what is the position of research in front of development cooperation, especially in this period of pandemic. The idea is an idea of perspective, only mine, is a Foucauldian perspective in which politics is concerned with power. And so when we speak about development cooperation, we speak about something that is linked with power, formal and informal, and development cooperation is not only something linked to technicalities, but it's always linked to politics. And so we have many different definition. Sorry, my son was about development cooperation, but and also we are in a period of crisis and maybe irrelevance of development cooperation. If someone is interested, I can consider this slide, but I just want to stress this point. If we want to have a sort of formal definition, we can take the Italian law, as we are in Italy, and about development cooperation, that is this law of 2014, but it has begun to function in 2016. So it's quite recent, that says that international cooperation for sustainable development, human rights and peace, hereinafter referred to as development cooperation. So when we speak about development cooperation, we mean, according from a formal institutional point of view, we are speaking about international cooperation for sustainable development, human rights and peace. Here, acknowledging the centrality of human beings, both as individuals and members of a community, development cooperation pursues the fundamental objectives and uprooting poverty and narrowing inequalities, defending and upholding human rights, preventing conflicts. So all activities that are in some way oriented in this perspective can be considered development cooperation. In reality, another perspective that comes from ECOSOC, that is the Development Cooperation Forum, says that development cooperation means this kind of activities, so supporting and complementing efforts of developing countries to guarantee the provision of universal social basic standards, to exercise their basic human rights, promoting the convergence of the developing and particularly the poorest countries to higher level of income and well-being, and supporting efforts of developing countries to participate actively in the provision of international public goods. So backside that is very linked. And there are 4 criteria, aims explicitly to support national or international development priorities. The international development priorities are Sustainable Development Goals in this period and Agenda 2030, is not driven by profit, discriminates in favor of developing countries, and is based on cooperative relationship that seek to enhance developing country ownership. So this is some always institutional, it's not research, but in some ways quite reflexive and critical perspective about development cooperation. Then there are a huge amount, really massive quantity of definition about development cooperation. I have developed some reflection about these, about the relationship between research and development cooperation. And I think that we can in some way try to make a distinction between research for cooperation, research about cooperation, and research in cooperation. And we can start from research in cooperation, in development cooperation. That is, all the actors that are active in development cooperation, maybe the little NGOs or the big UN agency, so or the World Bank or a government, okay? They have a demand of research just to understand where to intervene, why to intervene, how, many questions that are all in some way very practical, but they express a demand for research. And so we have a research inside the development cooperation. Obviously, the big agency have also research study center like the World Bank, like the many UN agency, but also big NGOs or some national government, they do research for these. We have a research about development cooperation, in which development cooperation is the object of our research. So we can study development cooperation activity, maybe the activity by NGOs, by a national government, we can study a program, a project, the rationality, but we are an external actor, a research actor that studies cooperation. Then this research can be only for academic purpose, or in some way is a research that is requested by some actors that could come from development cooperation. For instance, there is a geographer that is Anthony Babington, that is an expert of Latin America on rural development. He has done several research about the role of NGOs in rural development and development cooperation in Latin America. This research about development cooperation. Then there is a research that I call research for cooperation, in which the research is not expressly done for development cooperation activity, but in some way can be in some way useful for development cooperation activity. For instance, if I go in Senegal, I can refer more explicitly. In Senegal, the capital is Dakar, is the principal city, very big city, but the second city in Senegal is Touba. If you go from an administrative point of view and research for Touba, you probably don't find it, because it's not a city in the formal sense, but it's a very important city, it's a religious city. It has not a measure, at least until some years ago, but there is a religious authority, because it is the city of the confrère, the Murid, which is one of the organization inside the Muslim world in Senegal. There are the Murid and the Tijan, the two big groups. So Touba is the saint city in Senegal, okay? One geographer, Moussassi, wrote a very interesting book about Touba. It's not a book for development cooperation, but it's very useful if you want to work in that area, just to understand how the society, the territory function. So there are many researches that in some way can be useful for development cooperation, in which you have to consider development cooperation actors, but as other actors, as you consider that there are some players on the ground. And so, we consider that each research activity is always a research action or form-action activity, that studying a reality, we contribute to change this reality, because we contribute to change the representation of this reality that we want to study. And this perspective is very commonly used also inside the world of development cooperation, the most reflexive word on development cooperation. And this distinction can be used also in the field of geography or planning. We could plan. So we can have a geography of cooperation, in which we study actors, rationality, and fluxes of cooperation. We can have a geography in cooperation, in which there is a demand of geographical knowledge, geographical in the most wider sense, geographical knowledge in development cooperation. Then we can have this geography for cooperation, in which, for instance, if you want to work in the rural Senegal in pastoralism, there are still nowadays some studies that some French geographers has done in the 60s they are very important still nowadays to understand the world of Fulani group, that is the Peul or Fulani, that is the most important pastoral group in Senegal. Okay, I think that I can stop here.
Okay, thank you so much, Egidio. I think it was so useful to understand a bit better in the context in which we are moving. So also both institutionally speaking and also about the possible interaction that research and development cooperation can have. So thank you very much. Okay, if anyone has like a burning question that they cannot wait, can ask now. But if you agree, we can go on now and listen to Elisabeniante presentation. So if there is nothing to be asked here, I'm going to leave the floor to Elisa. So thank you, Egidio, and
I will share my screen. Just tell me if you can see it, because I want to share website. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. I don't see you at the moment. I just see a screen, but I am confident you can see me. Okay.
And everything else.
So something about me as well, as Caterina was saying, I am also a geographer. I would say a social geographer. I have, in the last, I would say, 15 years, and it's nice to be here with Egidio today as I started getting interested in international cooperation thanks to Egidio 18 years ago. And even if we work very close every day and share lots of problems and issues, sometimes we don't have time to reflect and share our reflections on the work we do. So it's very nice to have this chance today. As Caterina was saying, Egidio introduced us to the big picture, so the framework of international cooperation, and he explored some of the links between academy and international cooperation, research and international cooperation, also by showing you what we do through teaching and researching. My task today is starting from the field and showing you an example of interaction between academic research and international cooperation, reflecting on it. And this example is Cobra Collective. I will be telling you something in a minute. But I was telling something very briefly about me. As I was telling you, in the past 15 years, I've been working using participatory approaches, participatory visual methods more in general, and peer research approaches in community-based research studies, mainly in Africa and Latin America. With a particular interest, which is that of exploring the potential of creating research methods in establishing a dialogue in which participants can share their views and their perceptions of the world. And I think that, and I'm telling you this because I think that this is one of the links between academic research and international cooperation. And in my perspective, this link is action research. So action research representing a bridge between academic research and international cooperation. And I would like to tell you something more about this and reflect with you on this. I'm just noting down how much time I have. So it's 15 minutes. So it would be talking until, so just to make sure I won't talk too much. My research in the last years has focused mainly on the Amazon forest, and the students who are following this seminar already know about these studies. In a nutshell, my studies mainly focused on Guyana, South America, the Amazon forest, and I've been working with indigenous communities of the Guyanese Amazon forest, using participatory video and participatory photography to find ways to integrate indigenous communities community solutions within policies addressing social, economic, and environmental crises. And in a minute, I'll tell you how we can relate to this as action research. So a research aiming at promoting social change. Somehow, hopefully, promoting social change. And one of the big projects I worked on was a 7th framework programs. Seventh framework programs were programs financed by the European Union. There were big problems financing research and networks of research among different universities. And in this specific project I worked with, the name of the project was Cobra, the European Union was not only funding interactions within universities, but also interactions within universities and local communities, social enterprises, associations, NGOs, so much wider and richer and complex partnerships. And on this project, we worked with several communities in the Amazon forest. The aim of the project was to help these communities to find their own solutions to climate change challenges by engaging in action research processes, meaning researching with them in order to find together solutions to environmental challenges, solutions that were coming from their own experiences at the community level. And so that's the way we worked. It is called peer research. So what we did was paying indigenous researchers to carry out research. So we worked alongside with them in carrying out our research. And when this project was over, very strong relationships and exchange had developed. And we really felt us, Western researchers, the indigenous researchers, many aid workers of the organizations we work with, we felt that this journey we took together was not over and that we wanted to keep on engaging in these activities. And that's when we founded Cobra Collective. Cobra Collective is a UK-based social enterprise who, as I was telling you, other colleagues and I, the colleagues involved in this project, founded after several years of joint research in the Amazon forest, with the aim of developing participatory action research projects with marginalized communities. So that is the purpose, and you can see this is the website of the, in the vision and governance and organization of Cobra Collective, you can read more about it. But just to give you a flavor, the idea was that of developing participatory action research project with marginalized communities, engaging them through participatory visual methods in trying to define together problems that these communities were facing, trying to find together solutions, and trying to bring this solution to the attention of policymakers. So it's not just researching, but trying to promote some kind of change, some sort of change. We currently have a membership of 16 researchers and practitioners of different nationalities in Europe and Latin America, including 6 indigenous researchers. And the common thread of our different projects, here you can see the people engaged in Cobra Collective. And here you have the projects we're developing, very different projects, basically all over the world, both in the north and in the south of the world. And if you click on each of these pictures, you can gain more information on the different projects that we're developing. So we're becoming a big family with lots of projects carried out by different people with different perspectives, different backgrounds. And it's also quite challenging. And if we have the time, I'll like to share with you some ethical concerns we're going through and a process in which we're trying to define our core ethical principles. Indigenous researchers are part of this social enterprise, and I think that Caterina asked me to share this experience because it is an experience of researchers becoming activists, becoming networkers, but remaining researchers and dealing with all the challenges of research and international development projects. And so it's a nice way of reflecting on all the challenges and perspective of bringing together academic research and international cooperation. So can you see my PowerPoint at this point?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Okay, very well. So Cobra Collective, and this being said, and the activities of Cobra Collective being quickly presented, as I was reflecting on today's presentation, two keywords came to my mind. And these two keywords, which I think are really the bridge between academic research and international cooperations, these two keywords I thought of are activism and research, action research more specifically. So I'll start by reflecting on the first keyword, which is activism. Somehow, when we founded Cobra Collective, we felt that carrying out research projects as we used to do with our universities or outside universities wasn't enough for us. We somehow wanted to commit more our work to the communities, with the communities we were working with, and somehow we reflected on how we wanted to be and how we perceived ourselves as activists. And I found this very interesting article by Jan Maxey, which is titled Beyond Boundaries, Activism, Academia, Reflexivity and Research, which was written in 1999, but it's very relevant with these reflections today as well. And it's very interesting, and it talks very much to the relationship between academic research and international aid. And Maxey proposes an inclusive, reflexive view of activism, something that Egidio was reflecting on just a few minutes ago, which places us all as activists somehow. And here are a few quotes from this article, which I think are quite interesting. And I leave you reading them, but I want to highlight some aspects. He says, we are in a sense all activists, as we are all engaged in producing the world. Critical rather than transparent reflexivity, like the activism outlined above, involves deeply personal processes of transformation that form part of a wider emancipatory changes. So actually what Maxey is telling us is that everything we do, every thought we have contributes to the production of the social world. And the way Maxey understands activism, it is to be a process of reflecting and acting upon this condition. So somehow in your PhD research, in your dissertations, in the work you carry out in the world as a researcher or an aid worker, we're all somehow activists. And as researchers, the theoretical positions and the way we relate to our work can become part of our activism. And I very much like this quote by Routledge, where Routledge says, certainly no simple opposition exists between academia and activism. Rather, occupying a third space of critical engagement enables research to become a personal and reflexive project of resistance. And our engagement in Cobra Collective through action research, I think that it was and it is our way to find our balance between academia and activism. And it's our way of occupying this third space of critical engagement Routledge talks about, which enables us, at least we hope, with lots of challenges I would like to share with you, but which enables us to create a personal and reflexive projects of resistance. And the second keyword is research. So for development workers, research is crucial to improving social well-being, and development work usually aims to create social change of some sort, and there are many theories of how social change takes place. And on top of these theories, there are many more theories about how development workers can and should intervene in this process, and Egidio told us something about this already. But one way of thinking about the use of research types activities within development work is to focus on how research can contribute towards processes of change. And this is very much what we try to do in Cobra Collective. And I think this is very much what several of you will try to do in their PhD research. And there are a number of different ways of looking at this, all of which are used in development work. And so I'm just really focusing on one specific way, so on a very small aspect in a much wider world. And this aspect is action research. So why action research? If we move from the idea that there's not one fixed reality, but there are several ways of looking at reality, and several, so we're talking about ontologies, and several different ways of producing knowledge. So multiple realities and multiple ways of looking, understanding, and acting. Then if this is our assumption, the researcher is not alone in producing knowledges, and but it is engaged in a much more complex process of engaging with multiple ways of looking at reality. And if we link this to the ethics and power relations that we find within research in the global south as well, another problem linked to extracting knowledge, of Western researchers extracting knowledge in developing areas. And there's a huge wide debate on this. And I won't go into this right now, but if we bring all of this together, so how we perceive and understand realities, how can we understand realities, how can we study realities, how can we produce knowledge in a more participatory and plural way? Well, my personal answer is not only my personal, because I have quite a few other colleagues and believe in the same thing, but my personal answer is through participatory research and peer research and action research more in general. And here I put a quote of a colleague and friend of mine, Jackie Shaw, and another colleague and friend of mine, Tessa Lewin, who reflect exactly on this, on how participatory approaches to research really allow us to shift our ontological orientation towards multiple realities and how to engage with these multiple realities. And so in a nutshell, to make a long story short, what we do in Cobra Collective is creating participatory video and photography, presenting a wide range of community-owned solution strategies to cope with a wide range of social ecological challenges. And here you have some pictures of different projects and experiences that have been carried out in order to make these community-owned solutions come to the surface through very long processes of action research. Because when we talk about action research, we don't talk about very quick incursions in the field, but we talk about projects that can last several months to several years. So this is time is a very important component of this. And the key features are discussing, challenging with communities, identifying possible solutions, and the recording of this solution using participatory visual techniques in order to share these solutions. And we talk about horizontal communication when we share this knowledge with different communities, or we talk about vertical knowledge exchange when we try to reach policymakers at different levels. And we do this through peer research with the idea that research needs to be carried out with people living in the research context. So with people knowing the context, sharing problems with the communities, and so working side by side with them. And I think I will stop here as my 15 minutes have passed. Here, I just had some reflections on why participatory action research can really be a bridge between academic research and international cooperation. And some of the reasons are linked to the fact that action research means carrying out research with people rather than on people or about people. And because action research is about building relationships and building more equitable relations with all the challenges and difficulties of doing that. I'm not saying it's all this nice and easy, but the idea is going towards that. So developing practical knowledge to solve real world problems, which is where the Tourism Burnea academic research meets practical problems and tries to solve them. So very practical and concrete engagement of academic researchers in real world problems. Researching what is and then using that knowledge to act to improve the situation. So the fostering social change part of it. And so I think I will stop it here and give the floor back to Caterina.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a really inspiring presentation, I think, for many of us. And I think it complemented very well Egidio's presentation by giving us some insights from the field and also from what it means to reinvent and to think about how to make these two worlds work together. So thank you again. And now I'd like to open the floor for discussion. So if anyone has some questions or some reflection or want to share their experiences, please feel free to talk, to speak up, or if you want, you can use the chat. So yeah, I will, if is there anyone willing to ask some question, this is the right time to do it. Well, maybe I can break the ice because I have many questions. So maybe I can start with asking mine. We saw that international cooperation is a world composed by many, many actors. There is this huge network of people, of entities, organizations, communities. So I was wondering, if you can talk a bit about the position of the researcher within this network. So if, well, in the moment in which he or she carries out a research activity in international cooperation realities, it may maybe happen that, there's maybe a conflict of interest between the involvement in a context of social fragility, which such as the ones in which international cooperation actors operate, and on the other hand, the desire to carry out research that has an academic value. So how can we manage this tension, if it can be perceived as a tension? Because as Elisa, you said, there are ways in which, with which to overcome this tension, but yeah, my question is it like possible that maybe these dynamics linked to the context can lead to, like, can jeopardize in some ways the independence of research? So if you can, yeah, talk a bit about that, it would be nice. So.
To Caterina, may I start?
Sure.
Okay, Elisa has already said many things. First of all, I would like to say that from a certain point of view, in each research activity, we have this kind of tension. In the sense that, I don't know, when I have done my PhD research, okay, I have chosen the topics, without any kind of conditionality, if not apart from that of the professor that were Giuseppe De Matteis, Anna Segre, Sergio Conti, with whom I was discussing my work, and it was on the environmental problems of the textile district of Biella in particular. But when I began I started my research, I began to get in touch with some actors that were the organization of industrial producer, that was the local authorities, and in some way, they were interested to my research. And this kind of tension was already there, even if it was a research that I have chosen from without any other kind of pressure. Obviously, in the world, and the same tension you can find in some way if you do a research on marginality and social marginality and social vulnerability in urban district in Turin, for instance. You do your research, but in some way you get in touch with the policies of the Turin municipality, of other actors in some way. So in international development cooperation, there are more things in the sense that, first of all, that is a cultural gap that is very important to be considered. There is this explicit in some way, presence of the development conception with many different positionality. For instance, both at the University of Turin, both at the Politecnico of Turin, there are many researchers that are in some way engaged with development cooperation, but in different way. Can be medicians, is it correct? People, doctors, yeah. Okay. They go in, I don't know, somewhere in Africa, and they are volunteer, they work in an hospital, but they are working in development cooperation in some way. Maybe in some cases with a high level of reflexivity, and so they work, for instance, for Medicines Sans Frontières, for emergency, or for other organizations. And in other cases, as volunteers. Or there are, for instance, agronomists or engineers that, so there is a really different level of reflexivity. Obviously, in the social and human domain, human studies, social science, it's particularly important to have this kind of reflection on your positionality. But I can assure that many disciplines don't have this kind of reflection. And so it's important not only for yourself, but also as maybe that you are in contact with other colleagues that work, for instance, in rural development, and they are agronomists, veterinary, I don't know, veterinary specialist, animals specialist, okay, and so in some way it's really important. This also considering the fact that I don't know, there are some radical positions that are among two extreme positions. One extreme position is that development is always a good thing. Development and growth is not, there is not a very important distinction, and you are engaged for the sort of commonwealth. And the other extreme position, especially from radical social scientists, is that you cannot use the word development. You are in a post-development discourse, and you have to reflect how you engage yourself in not in finding alternative development, but alternative to development. In some way, the Cobra project is more or less linked to this. But there are also organizations and NGOs that work in this perspective. So there are very, very different positions inside the world of development cooperation, and you choose in some way the partner with which you want to work. Also considering, it's important, we say, for instance, World Bank, but inside the World Bank, there are some programs and projects that are very, in some way, mainstream, but are very critical towards the World Bank. So the reality is more complex than our scheme.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you. I don't know if Elisa, you want to add something?
Yes, there are so many things I would like to add. I will start with some reflections, and then maybe I agree with Egidio that you find power asymmetries, and you find fragility and cultural difference and vulnerability, and you need to position yourself within your research context, no matter where you work. But what he was saying, and I agree with, and what I think we have to reflect upon, is that power asymmetries and fragility and cultural gaps and vulnerability are much greater when working in the Global South. And so the challenges are greater, and it's harder to relate with all this. And another reflections I would like to make on this is that sometimes we based our reflections on the way we perceive ourselves, but we do not base our reflections to the ascribed identities, meaning how other people see us. And that sometimes is more relevant. And sometimes being an aid worker or being a researcher in Senegal or Mali or the Amazon forest is not that different for the person we work with. In Senegal, you are, if you are a white Westerner, you are Tubab. And it doesn't matter whether you are a researcher or an aid worker. The way people perceive you is not that different. Your ascribed identity is something that, so we also have to keep that in mind, and that's very important because we relate with those people, and the identities they attribute us are very important in the building of a relationship among us. Also to that, I think it's important to add the fact that there's a huge difference between research and action research and working in the international aid field, which is the concreteness, the practical aspects of what you leave to communities when you're carrying out an international aid project, which is 5 schools, 5 wells, something very practical that people, what are you leaving with people when you carry out research? Academic reflections have engaged with extractivism within research. So research being extracting information from, particularly from vulnerable contexts, without bringing anything back. And so after my carrying out several projects in the Amazon forest, I published on international journals, articles that were very important for my career. What did I leave with participants? So this is a big debate, and I mean, we would need time to reflect on all the different aspects of this. But actually, as researchers trying to engage as activists and carrying out actual research, we have to face this. And so we have extractive information, and even when our approach is not that, it's harder to engage with people. And in the project I carried out in the Amazon forest, very often people were asking me, why should we interact? Why should we participate? What does it? What practical and concrete comes to us besides more abstract knowledge on a topic? And you can understand that this is a problem for people, because for engaging in my participatory activities, they have to miss 2 hours working in the field. And if I don't pay them for that, also the ethics about this are quite tricky. If I am engaging them in these activities, why should they do that? And the answer, what I tell my students is that research is so important, because if you don't understand what problems are, and if you don't understand problems with people, then how can you plan sustainable and long-lasting interventions? And that's very true, but at the same time, people don't have that much time, and it's not that easy to share this aspect with them, and the importance of research with them. And I could go on talking about several other challenges, how we engage participants, whether we pay them, how do we, how do we position ourselves in a continuum going between being inside and outside as friends, but at the same time, employees when we pay them, or, it's quite hard. It's really tricky to carry on this kind of relationships. And my answer to this complexity is really reflecting constantly on our positionality, and so reflecting constantly on how our position changes, and look at ourselves from outside somehow, and try and think and reflect on how we engage with people, how people engage with us, and reflect on this evolving relationship from different perspectives, and without ever feeling that we found a stable position, because it's always very unstable, I'd say.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sounds very complicated, but I agree. I totally agree. And yeah, I don't know if there are other questions, maybe building on what we are discussing, or also about the presentations.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. I was wondering for the fact that identifying the research topic is a political choice in many cases. In particular, reflecting about action research, who's responsible to identify the real problems you mentioned? I mean, is the researcher the civil society the researcher is talking to, or both of them together? I mean, which is the boundary between a network-directed process in which the researcher fixes a problem, identifies a problem, and investigates about it, or waits the locals to identify and stress a problem and then works with them?
If I can go first and then pass it on to Egidio.
Yes.
I'd say thank you for this question. And I think there's not, I mean, the answer changes as the research changes, and depending on the approach you want to embrace. If the approach you're embracing is participatory research or action research, and I think that's a framework in which you say your question, I'd say that it should be something that we figure out together. And this together can mean different levels of interactions, but I think that the idea is that of defining the topic together with people. If I want to carry out action research, because I want the problem really to sound to people, because I want people to work with me on that specific issue, and I want that issue to be relevant for them, and to find and to define the issue, because we can define topics in several different ways from several different perspectives, and we want to find a perspective that talks to people and that people want to engage with. So if we are talking about action research, I don't think there are boundaries, but I think it's a process that it's important to carry out together. And I say together because I think that there's a tendency, which I don't agree with, in participatory research, to sort of feel that the researcher, the Western researcher, is somehow guilty because he or she exists, because he or she is actually doing something and not leaving everything to participants. I think that is not right as well. If we think of research as an exchange of knowledge, as perspective, and the researcher has a role and should have a role. So it's developing this process together with people. That's my very personal give on this.
Thank you. I don't know if Egidio, you want to add something?
Oh, yes. I think that what Elisa said, it's very important in the sense that there is for social research, not only for social research, but particularly for social research, the need for being critical, reflexive, and on our positionality. This request is even more important if you have to do with something linked to development cooperation. In the sense that as Elisa said, I would like, for me, it's important to think that you start from the need of the people, the need of a situation of sufferance, of really maybe poverty, and a very critical situation in which your possibility of doing research is very important, because it's about knowledge, is about you have a lot of tools as someone who is doing is inside a formation period, and this is particularly important in when you work in some way linked to development cooperation, because it should be explicitly oriented to reduce sufferance, to intervene in the problem. If we go at the very core part of what should be development cooperation, then we know that there are, we can, for instance, study development cooperation from a very critical point of view, trying to understand what are, for instance, the neo-colonial discourses and interests. So it's very important to do this. Is a particular kind of perspective, but some way, if you consider in my perspective, I try to start from this point of view, but I think that so just to conclude, is particularly important and considering your potential role in development cooperation. And what development cooperation helps you in some way is that there is an explicit, or there should be an explicit procedure to assess, to identify needs, for need assessment, okay? And you can in some way try to have a sort of parallelism between the building a research project or building a development project. There are obviously differences, but in some way you always need, also for your research, especially in our domain, in the social science research, in urban and regional development research, we need a theory of change, what in the development cooperation is used, because we need to make it explicit. What is our own theory of change that inspires our research? Excuse me, that I didn't stop my phone. Okay, I don't know if I have answered to Riccardo.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much to both of you.
Ciao, Riccardo.
Okay, so thank you very much for the question and for the answer. I think we have another question from Lorenzo, who, asked in the chat if we have time for one more, and if you agree, we take this one, and maybe then we can, we can see if there is any other question, or this is the last one. So I'm gonna leave the floor to Lorenzo.
Thank you, Caterina, and thank you, Elisa and Egidio, for this interesting talk. I had many questions, but most of them have been answered in your replies to the other questions. But I still wanted to ask something, especially on fieldwork, maybe connecting to what Elisa was saying before. Well, you mentioned about reflexivity, which is really important, like since the really first approach to the research. And it happened that in my previous experiences in international cooperation, I noticed how I became the field to a certain extent. Well, it was really complicated situations, but at a certain point, like the microdynamics among people became, I became like the mediators between them, like even though I didn't want that to happen, but it happened. And because of my research that I will develop in these 3 years, I was thinking about this thing, because I'm going to be working with the urban refugees and I'll be on camps most of the time. So I was reflecting, will it be the case that I become part of the field as a person that maybe goes there and delivers food, as a, I mean, what do you think about this positionality even through the moment of the field? Micro things that might happen. And I hope I was clear. Thank you.
Elisa, do you start?
Just elaborate some more on what you mean when you say I become part of the field. Do you mean that you are very much engaged in part of what you very much engage in what you study, so we could say you're an insider, or you're studying dynamics that involve you directly, or something different, just to make sure I understand?
Okay, well, the first, I'll just explain you the case. So I was a practitioner as an architect. So we had like, we were in this NGO and there were many dynamics going on, but at a certain point, like locals were complaining about the NGOs where I was part. So I became the mediator between them. And well, I was a practitioner, so it was not research. So like the dynamics were different, but after 4 months on field, I felt like I was part of the community because people was taking me as a point of reference. So I was, I changed, of course, I changed the field in that case. I mean, I changed the local dynamics. So like, well, again, it was a real practitioner approach. So it wasn't research, but still, what if, I mean, what if that happens during research, even though like it's not what we aim to become? I mean, well, it's a really abstract question maybe, but still I was thinking like, what happens if in this field that I'm going to approach soon, like in the real daily dynamics, I would change the field. So I become part of the field by changing it, even though that's not my aim. That is like how to, I mean, my question is how to be reflexive in that case.
Yeah, I understand very well. And I think it's very interesting what you're saying. And I would start by saying that we all do change the field. Just by being there, just by interacting with people, we do change the field. Of course, there are several ways in which we do that and different levels. And there are researchers who are activists, who study their being activists. And so that's really, I mean, that sounds to me in concerning what you are saying. And so they are doing actually auto-ethnographies of their own engagement. And so this is just to say that there are different ways of carrying out research and finding your place in research. And what I think is really important in all this is being really clear and transparent and honest about what's going on. And I think that's the most important thing. So if you become part of the field and you contribute in changing it and you are one of the actors, there are some interesting articles of academics reflecting on being insiders as they are studying their own communities, their own association, their own NGO, for example. And so, and all the challenges, the positionality challenges involved in this, because sometimes it's harder to be an insider carrying out research than being an outsider. Because when do you tell your friends, okay, now I'm the researcher and now I'm your friend activist, and boundaries? It's all about how do I set boundaries and how flexible are these boundaries? So I think it is a matter of when you write about your research, when you in your research diary, in your sharing your research with others, in your collecting data in all the different phases of research, is being really transparent and honest about what's going on and what is your position, which is a position that can change in time, because you can be an insider in a certain phase and be more outsider in another, so it's very fluid. But being very clear about what's going on and how you position yourself, knowing that this position changes over time. So that's what I would say.
I would like to add another point that maybe Elisa has already said, and she afforded also in some paper, because there is also an issue about the distinction between doing, for instance, you, Lorenzo, are you said you are an architect or a planner?
I was an architect, but now I'm a, let's say, urban geographer, kind of.
Okay, but an architect or a planner is expressly oriented to changing the reality, to transform, to intervene. So is absolutely in this what is the distinction between working in Turin or working in Addis Abeba? Okay. One distinction is that, and linked to a development cooperation project. The distinction is that you are, the complexity is you have much more complexity in this second case, because there is a cultural gap, a geopolitical gap, economic interest. So it's more difficult. But I don't know. I gave you two examples. One example is, I don't know if you have already met Michele Lancione, who is a new professor. Okay, I think that I have heard his reflection on positionality, and really I appreciate him very well. He's very radical in this, but I think, but also I remember also Alberto Magnaghi sometimes ago that say that in some way, if you work in a reality, in some way you become part, and you are in some way a sort of you work for this reality, and you choose to abandon your position of researcher in order to serve for this reality, for this local, you adopt in some way this local community in which you work, as in some part for the research of Elisa they have done. And but so there is this kind of approach. A student of mine, Davide Cirillo, some years ago, he started studying land grabbing in Senegal. He started this research from an independent point of view. He began to study land grabbing, and also he was doing his PhD between the University of Padova and the University of Amsterdam, I don't know, with geography and anthropology. And so the reflection on positionality was very high. But working there, he has been engaged by ActionAid, who was working that period to, in some way, doing advocacy against land grabbing. He has been engaged by the local community, very traditional authorities that, as Davide was able to speak Wolof and Fulani also, and so they had a researcher that was able to speak their language. And also the Italian enterprise that was responsible of the conflict about the case study tried to engage him. So, and he started just from an academic point of view with 3 different actors that were engaged in a conflict, and in some way it was not development cooperation, but it was in some way linked to this. No? And so when you are in the field, or you are always engaged in some way, and maybe that you have to choose.
Thank you very much to you both for your explanations.
And as you were talking, a quote, I just found a quote by geographer Stuart Aitken, and which deals with struggle. And I think that research somehow has to do with struggle and the way we feel while carrying out research. And he says, I struggle with my lack of Spanish. I struggle with my whiteness. I struggle with my adultness, my status, my relative affluence, and my ability to escape to my home upon which I work and live comfortably. But most of all, I struggle with my research agenda and the ways it relates to the lives of the young people and their families. And I mean, it sounds to me to what you were saying. So there's a dimension of struggling as we engage in research and as we to feel that struggle, we don't need to go to the global south. I mean, Stuart Titan works in close to the Mexican boundary. So it's really a matter of how engaging it is and how we engage in research with ourselves, with our emotions, our passions, what we believe in, with our fears. And so I think that struggle is a component. And also the reflecting on, how, am I doing well? Am I inside or am I outside? Am I changing the field? Is all part of this struggle I think we need to learn to put up with somehow. So I guess that the research process for a researcher is learning how to put up with struggle and with feeling unease. Not at ease with the situation, with people, with the research question, with the topic, with policymakers, and so on and so forth. And try to navigate this.
Thank you so much for your answers and for what you share with us today. I think it's 6:30, so if are there any other questions that were left unexpressed, I will invite you maybe to send me an email so I can forward them to our guests. So I think we can thank them for today's talk, and we can finish here our session. So yeah, if there is anything urgent, I see. So okay. So thank you again for everything. Thank you for everyone who participated and connected and were connected. And I will see you next talk on the 9th of June. And that's it. So thank you again. Have a nice evening, and and talk to you.
Thank you, Caterina.
It was very nice.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Also from the chat, they are saying it was interesting. So well done.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.